back to the Kingsway Podcast.
Welcome.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Got a fun one today. A little stressful.
Got a really fun one.
That we don't know about yet.
We've had different series and seasons where we'll lean on a topic really heavily, like all of our chosen episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I know that those are very particular because you kind of have to watch the episode to see what our episode's about. So like that took up a lot of time. We had our vision and values, which was great, but it took up a lot of airspace. But kind of our meat and potatoes is
always been there.
Verse of the day ones.
Verse of the day. We need a jingle.
We do need a jingle for that. If you are a composer or a jingle writer or something like that.
A jingle writer.
A jingler. Let's not take that any further. If you write jingles, you should help us out with this one.
Your kids may have a show that you absolutely hate that has a cute little jingle that we could help turn it into an even more haunting jingle.
I think I just want to rewrite Baby Shark into
there you go.
Verse of the day.
There you go. Verse of the
I'm
day.
not going to do that right now.
Day. Verse of the day. Sorry.
Grandpa verse of the day. Baby verse of the day.
So we haven't looked it up.
That's true.
We have not looked at it yet.
And before we even get into it.
Yes, because we want to talk a little bit about the future.
Yeah. We want to let you know that we have been, without saying anything in particular, we've been thinking about the next few months of episodes, and we've already scheduled guests. We know. I've now that I've finished my master's program, we're picking out books that could be episodes or books that could fuel episodes. So we don't want to talk about too much and give away too much, but we've got some really good stuff coming out this summer.
We know that lawnmower season is coming.
Yeah.
And so
this is the Lawnmower Podcast.
We want to be prepared.
That is our audience. People in jean shorts just above the knee, no t-shirt.
Yep. Straw hat.
Yep. Riding lawnmower.
And if they have a t-shirt on, it must be a torn sleeved flannel, fully open.
Yep.
No buttons. No buttons.
Buttons have been cut off with scissors.
Yep. And Arnold
You don't
Palmer's.
even want to be tempted. Yep. Arnold Palmer in a Camelback, the like backpack water.
See, I was picturing more like a canning jar.
Oh yeah, that too. Riding lawnmower, which serves two purposes: mowing your lawn and driving you to Walmart. This is our primary audience.
Taco Bell drive-through.
Now, if we could just stop insulting you, maybe we could get on with. No, I will tell you what the next one will be about, though, just to pique your interest.
Yeah, pique it.
It's going to be the first of a two-part episode series. Where the first part, we're going to be talking about our favorite Marvel movies.
Yep.
Because Doctor Strange is coming out, and we will have just seen it and then record the episode and then put it out.
Yep.
Followed up quickly by the second episode, well, the same speed, the same one a week. But by the second episode, talking about story and how it interacts with and impacts our faith and how it's a part of our faith.
Absolutely.
And how some of these Marvel movies and other compelling stories interact with our faith.
And I think it really came from conversations that you and I have had around superhero movies, the new Batman that came out, just some fun things, and then recognizing the power that those have to like capture attention and hold kind of this like inerrant. I just rewatched and have been driving you and John crazy by quoting Infinity War and Endgame because I rewatched them again.
And not even the cool lines.
No, the lines that
the lines that are like, this was a dumb joke that is not the purpose of this movie. Those lines.
Been holding you ransom, hostage with terrible quotes.
Yeah.
But then there are these moments where it's like, Avengers Assemble and like the power of that moment leading up in Endgame.
Yeah.
That it doesn't matter how many times you watch it. There's something about that you're like good, standing up versus evil. Like just anyway, very excited about this.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a fun series.
Yeah, we're actually gonna do research for it, which is a first.
A first.
No, I'm kidding. So we got some of that kind of stuff coming up. We got some more interviews with more professors and other people coming up.
And some books that we're excited that we're going to try to make manageable.
Yeah. Okay, I'll say a little bit about that. We have a bunch of books picked out that we want to read and suggest and have episodes about that are like 100 pages.
Yeah, we want to make them accessible. Like something you could read if you wanted to.
There's one specific book that I'm just waiting for Tim Snyder to give me back.
Yeah.
That would be a great book for this. Please, Tim, if you're listening, if you're mowing your lawn right now.
We need you.
I want it back. Anyway. So we've got a bunch of little books that are coming up. They may fuel episodes or may be what the episode's about or whatever.
Little discussions, fun things. And I know over the summer, we get a lot more people that pay attention and listen to it because they have a little time or they're driving or they're, they just, I think this is it's going to be a fun summer. I'm excited about it.
It will be.
But what's even going to be a little more fun?
Is this moment right now?
Is this moment right now where we find out what the verse of the day is.
I'm scared. Okay, I'm doing it.
Oh, gosh, I'm terrified.
Ooh, okay. Okay, verse of the day.
Is it in Numbers?
No.
Is it in the New Testament? Oh, gosh, it's Old Testament.
Isaiah 54:17.
Ooh, right after 53. See, this is
we do know how to count.
53 is the prophecy of Jesus. It's like the really famous one.
Okay.
For most Bible nerds, they know what Isaiah 53 is. So he's pierced for our transgressions, by his wounds.
Yeah.
We are healed type.
That one.
Type language.
So what we know about Isaiah already, before we even read this verse, Isaiah is a prophet.
Yep.
He is one of the major prophets.
Mm-hmm.
And he is prophesying in general near the end of Israel.
Yeah.
Most of the prophets in the Bible, in the prophet section of the Old Testament, are like just before, during, or after different, mostly the Babylonian exile, and some other stuff like that in Israel's history. 54:17.
Ooh.
What do you got? You're in the NIV 2011?
Is it 2011? Probably. Or is it?
I'm going to assume so.
It probably is.
Because I saw 2016 when it was given to you.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been good to know earlier. I am out of the NRSV. This is a very, very word for word, more hard to read translation than the NIV, no matter which version it is, 2011 or. I think you ripped out the pages.
No joke.
With I'm gonna assume it's 2011.
Okay.
Okay.
Assume away.
Okay, go for it.
54:17. I just lost my spot.
Okay, I'll do it.
No, I did.
This from the harder to read translation.
Mm-hmm.
No weapon that is fashioned against you shall prosper, and you shall confute every tongue that rises against you in judgment. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication from me, says the Lord.
Mine's actually not super different. So it says, no weapon forged against you will prevail, and you will refute every tongue that accuses you. And this is your heritage of the servants of the Lord. This is your vindication from me, declares the Lord. So.
Okay.
Interesting.
What are your initial thoughts?
It's prophetic, obviously. Isaiah is a very prophetic book. The imagery that's in here is pretty closely tied to a lot of imagery in Revelation.
Yeah.
So, this verse seems to have, it's always funny. We were talking about this at our small group, how verses get ripped out of context all the time.
Yeah.
I'm curious. And they're not, most of the time verses that are used out of context currently are done innocently. But they can be done maliciously, unintentionally, even maliciously, because they do it. And one of the verses that we mentioned was, of course, Philippians 4:13, which is I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength. But the second place finisher is not quick that far behind, which is Jeremiah 29:11, which is I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans for a hope and a future, plans to prosper and
not to not prosper.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Something like that. But the verse is specifically given to Israel.
Yeah,
like it's a promise to Israel, not necessarily to the nations of the world or to the Gentiles, which is what we are. So anytime that verse is used as like confidence in God, I'm always kind of like, hey, that's not really
confidence that God will do that for you specifically. Your material wants, your property ownership, your whatever. Yeah.
I'm feeling similar vibes here.
Yeah.
Where like I read that and I feel like what people would read this and immediately go like, sweet, I must be what this verse is about. And I don't know. Like I'm hesitant to be like, this is a declaration about us. You know what I mean? And God.
Yeah.
Maybe it's true about God, because so is Jeremiah 29:11. It's true. God fulfilled his promise. He was faithful. He was good to do that. But it may not be as a direct thing. I have to look at it. You know what I mean? Like I got to do a little more investigation. What
this is in the chapter. This is finishing the chapter between two of my favorite chapters in Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I love chapter 25 because it has a Revelation 21 reference. I'll wipe away every tear from their eyes. And chapter 6 is great. Him purifying Isaiah himself and cleansing his lips. He's a man of unclean lips and a people of unclean lips, cleansing him with the burning coal and whatever.
Well, and he says, "Here said me." You know, it's like, I need someone to go and tell the nations. And he's like, I'll send here, but I'm a man of unclean lips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So chapter 53, like you just mentioned, is a chapter called The Suffering Servant. Now, when Israel was, before Jesus showed up, they had heard all these promises from God. And at the point they were at, they had been exiled a few times over the past 1,000 years.
Yep.
Where they're defeated, they're shipped off to another nation, and eventually they let them come home. So right now they're like on the crux, balancing between being in exile, and they're kind of under house arrest because of Rome. So they think that all these prophecies and messages from God about victory, about whatever, are them killing and winning in a military battle against the rest of the world, against Rome, and then them spreading out. So they would read Isaiah 54, which before this, no weapon shall prosper formed against you. Before this has a lot of images of their nation, their tent expanding because they're growing, a lot of images of God being their victor, their redeemer, their these other things. But they didn't usually tie the suffering servant in Isaiah 53 to this budding kingdom. It would have felt like some sort of like two scenes in two different places in the same movie, two different characters, two different nations and whatever. So Isaiah 53 is very, very sad and depressing. It's this man that looks like a sacrificial lamb, this man that looks like a sacrifice that they're giving up. They have statements in here like he was despised and rejected by others, a man of suffering and acquainted with infirmity or with grief. They have statements like they made his grave with the wicked and his tomb with the rich. Although he had done no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth, yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him with pain. They heard this and were like, I don't know what that's about, but look at Isaiah 54. We won. So the reason I think this is really cool for Christians to read this, to read Jesus back into this, is you have this gut-wrenching passage, Isaiah 53, about the suffering servant. That's Jesus. By his stripes we are healed is one of those lines in that chapter. Then it gets to 54. What does it open with? Sing, O barren one, who did not bear. Burst into song and shout, for you have not been in labor. You who have not been in labor. For the children of the desolate woman will be more, and the children of her that is married, says the Lord. It's this like what is dead is now made alive, even if it seemed
when there was no hope,
unable to be overcome. We'll expand the size of your tent. Do not be afraid. Do not be ashamed, for you will forget the shame of your youth and the disgrace of your widowhood. You will remember no more. For the Maker is your husband. The Lord of hosts is his name. This like God is turning everything around moment. As Christians, we're seeing that in light of Jesus' sacrifice, that life is bursting forth in our world so full of death. So you get all the way to the end. No weapon that is fashioned against you shall prosper, and you shall confute every tongue or refuse every tongue who rises against you in judgment. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. This is the promise that Jesus has brought to us without any. We were lifeless, but now we have life again. Okay, then it gets to Isaiah 55, my other favorite chapter in Isaiah. I've never read it out of this version before. Usually it's like, listen, or come look, or whatever. This one's like, ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the water. And you that have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend money for that which is not bread, and you labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen so that you may live. It's this giant banquet on top of Mount Zion. As you get lower, you'll see it's in Mount Zion where God's holy city is and whatever. It goes from Isaiah 53, this suffering servant full of pain and sorrow and anguish. He's a sacrificial lamb. And in Isaiah 55, 2 chapters later, there's this victory banquet feast. You even see that all the other nations are invited, which is like weird for them. They think they're invited because they're now our slaves. They're in exile in our land because we won, whatever. And 54 is this transitional chapter talking about how now that the suffering servant has died, now that the suffering servant has suffered for our sake and on our behalf.
You that had no hope, have hope.
They would read this as, we now have victory over our enemies, these other people in the neighboring nations, when in fact the expanding tent is expanding with adopted sons and daughters grafted into the tree that is God's chosen people.
So the cool thing about this section is this isn't just talking about Israel.
Yeah.
So that's the exact verbiage that's used in the Old Testament, is the grafting in.
Yeah.
Which, if you've never seen that before, there's some really cool YouTube videos on where they take two different fruit trees and they can get two different fruits off of the tree.
By grafting part of one into the other.
One into the other.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy where before you thought, oh, it's just an orange tree. And it's like, no, this is an orange and like a mandarin orange tree, or this is an orange and a lemon. Like they can have multiple flowers, it's pretty cool. Like how, and it's like, well, what do you mean? Well, it's like the sap of that tree ends up feeding into the sap of this completely genetically different tree, but it becomes one root system, flows from one place. The energy is, so it's kind of a very similar language here where like they would assume everyone's going to, I think the only people at the table are going to be those that are original to the plan, Israel. Yeah. But these verses in light of Jesus, because let's be real. These chapters are some of the strongest evidence to Jesus being the prophetic Messiah. Like these are the Sermon on the Mount is all about these blessed are those that mourn, that are hurting, that, very much so like a barren woman description. And then of course, what does Jesus do? He offers bread, and he offers wine at the first, it's one of his first miracles. He's offering, come all that are thirsty, I will give you something to drink. And woman at the well, he's like, if you knew who I was, you would ask me to give you water, and I'd give you water that flows up. It's everlasting. You'd never thirst again. And she said, well, if you have that water, I'd love some. It's
called Ozarka natural spring water. That's what he's talking about.
I think I think it's Fuji, actually. No, I was kidding. I think it's funny because this is, he's talking to a Samaritan in that specific thing, and this is that grafting in. It's that inviting her to the table, inviting her to drink with him, feast language. It's really cool.
Yeah. It's just a really cool, it seems to me like I'm probably reading way too much into it, but it seems to me that Isaiah 53 is Jesus suffering. Isaiah 54 is how his victory over death, his welcoming in of the foreigner, which, was it you who pointed out this past week that salvation belonging to the Gentiles is really good news for Kingsway Christian Church?
Yes.
Because none of us are Jews.
None of us are Jews.
Probably. Unless there's something we don't know. We're all Gentiles. We're all people outside of God's chosen nation from before. Yep. We've all been grafted in, and the tent has been expanded to cover us. And so 54 is the good news for you today, and 55 is the good news for you at the end of time.
Yeah.
The good news that you get to come, not only God comes to meet you and join in with your life, and you join in with his, and you receive the blessings of that in 54, but you get to commune with God himself and have dinner with him and get to know him as family. And also so does everybody else who accepts it.
I think what I love the most as reading through just these sections, and I know verse 17 is funny because it's one of the least engaging out of everything we read. Like, I'm like, it's a good nugget. I'm not trying to say it's a bad verse, but like, man, you read the first couple, like even just the first verse of chapter 55, like that's worthy of memorizing because that sounds like it come out of Matthew's gospel.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, and this is 1,000 years before,
something like that.
Like before Jesus shows up, hundreds,
and like 700 to 1,200 years before, somewhere in that range.
So it's like, come to all you are thirsty, come, you have no money, come and buy, eat, come buy wine, milk without money, without cost. And then, you could just throw that into chapter 12 of Matthew, come all you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. It's like, it legitimately... You get why when they say he talks with authority, you get why Jesus had listeners that were going like, he sounds a lot like some of the things that we've heard before. It's just I think I haven't read this section in a long time. It's making me.
It's a good section.
I was like, while you were talking and explaining things, I felt like I was like rereading some of this stuff. It's so good, man. Oh my god.
You asked what. Like how many years?
Yeah, how many years
before? And now I'm like trying to look up in my study Bible, just like
should have that answer, right?
Yeah, I should have just known it.
I mean, verse 3, it says, "Give, come, listen, and they may live." And then it says, "I will make an everlasting covenant with you, my faithful." Love put a promise to David. Say, "I have made him the witness to these people, a ruler, a commander of his people. Surely it will some of your nations, you will not. Your nations do not know and will come running to you." So it's legitimately just going like, although my promise was to David, I have kept that. It's now to all people.
Yeah.
Man, it makes me wish the Pharisees read more. Like I'm like, why didn't they read this?
It feels like the religious elites and the people directing the religion of Israel in Jesus' day started reading from like, I don't know, Genesis like 20 on, and forgot that originally Abraham's family was to be a blessing, was blessed to be a blessing to all nations and all families on the earth, not just to make a nation that exists as better than the other nations on the earth, but that exists to bless the nations on the earth.
We just preached 2 weeks ago on Philip
and the Ethiopian eunuch,
and I was trying to remember where.
He was Isaiah 53, I think, right?
53, 7, and 8. Yeah. So that makes sense why these whole sections, you know what I mean? Like,
as a refresher, Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, it's a story in Acts chapter 8 where one of the disciples, Philip, meets a guy, a foreigner on the road who's apparently pretty well off. He's riding in his chariot. He's reading a scroll of Isaiah. He's in chapter 53, verse 7 and 8. And he asks Philip if he understands what it means because he's reading it and he doesn't get it, which even having the scroll shows how rich he is. They didn't have a printing press, so buying written material was very expensive. And so he had Philip come in and explain it to him, and he explained it the way us Christians understand it, which is it's about Jesus and his sacrifice and whatever. And that those two verses brought this guy from, I don't know anything about the Jewish faith or very little because I'm not a national and I don't live here, to I see some water, what should stop me from being baptized?
Yep.
That's the power of God working in these chapters, in even just 53, and 54 naturally springs from it. It's the answer of God's people after Jesus' sacrifice.
And I think, what Philip basically is using is exactly what you talked about earlier, just the suffering servant concept.
Yeah.
I'm sure this guy is, it reminds me of like when you're connecting the dots and you haven't got on the internet yet.
Yeah.
And you haven't talked to another friend, but there's like a concept that all of a sudden it's clicking, but you haven't had confirmation and you haven't quite had enough time to process it. And then someone comes in and goes, "Oh yeah." And then like points that out to the nines. That's exactly what's going on. Because I'm just wondering if this guy had the book, he's probably read it before, but then he gets to Jerusalem and he's hearing about this guy that died and how he was innocent and he was killed. But then he like got back up, but he didn't fight. He didn't declare his innocence. He was quiet and all the way to his death. And I'm just wondering if someone in the crowd was just like, "Oh man, that sounds like that section the rabbi once talked about in Isaiah."
Yeah.
You remember those? You remember the words? What were those words? And then he's going, I got that scroll.
Yeah.
I should check that scroll out. And then he starts to read it, and it just happens that Peter's there, or not Peter, but Philip's there. I mean, it's such a cool thing.
Even in the church today, Isaiah 53. So in high church context, that doesn't mean better church. That just means more structured in general. In high church context, so think Anglican, Catholic, Episcopal. Anglican, Episcopal are the same thing. Whoops. Probably Lutheran, probably some other denominations. They use something called the lectionary. It is like a 3-year cycle of scriptures to read at different times in the year so that you can work your way through most of the Bible and whatever. They're usually different year by year, but every single year they have you read all of Isaiah 53 on Good Friday where you remember Jesus' death on the cross, as well as Psalm 22, which is another good picture of Jesus' crucifixion, foretold 1,000 or more some years beforehand. And so like the sheer importance of that chapter to our faith, that's like a major evangelism tool to modern day Jews, is to just read Isaiah 53 to them, which is in their Bible, and to say, doesn't that look like Jesus? And the amount of times that's worked for like totally committed, wholehearted Jewish people today, it's like crazy.
Yeah, well, and this chapter, it continues to be something that I think I wonder how, if you are a practicing Jew, you interpret this, that you're still waiting for the suffering servant, I guess. If
you see the suffering servant as the Messiah.
Yes. And that's I mean, it's a challenging section, I think, it makes obviously perfect sense when we read it, because this is the view that we would have, that Jesus fulfilled this. But man, it's crazy. I challenge anybody that's listening to this, just go pick up a Bible and read chapters 53 through 55. Like, I'm reading them right now. They're really encouraging and cool. There's some really cool stuff in here. Like, there's at least 14 tattoos worthy of Bible verses in here. Like, you can have a couple different of these, and it wouldn't be a bad tattoo.
Seriously,
I'm just saying, they're really cool. I hate needles, so I can't do it. I'm a baby.
We have an episode on tattoos.
We should have an episode on tattoos.
Yeah, we should.
Definitely. Hey, leave in the comments. Good, bad? Did you grow up with them? Are they the devil's mark, or are they a declaration of glory in the right context?
That is, I don't want to get there yet, but there's a verse about tattoos in Isaiah as well.
Ooh.
And that'll come up. It's like 44 or something. 44, 5. Anyway.
Also, Throne Room Experience, chapter 6 of Isaiah is really good too. That's a really fun one.
Yeah.
Really healthy. Well, this has been fun. We didn't absolutely kill it. I felt like, but you knew so much about this. I'm always happy when
I'm really glad it was something I knew a little bit about.
Like, I was just praying for the New Testament. So then when it was Isaiah, I was like, well, this could get real crazy. But that's really fun.
I didn't really know that much about it, like from study or anything. It's from, I read Isaiah 53 one time because somebody told me I should in some class or something. I don't know. And then I read it, and then I just kept reading.
Yeah.
I was like, well, that kind of makes sense with the, this kind of makes sense with the new.
Well,
with the,
it is funny how like each chapter here, you think sometimes prophet, Old Testament, it doesn't always, it feels like you get like 50% of it off the surface, maybe even less. And this is not that way. I feel like you'll read this and you'll be like, oh. You know what I mean? Like, and then even if you study it, I think obviously the truth goes deeper, but even at a surface level, this is a very, very encouraging section of scripture.
There's one last thing I want to talk about, and I'm not going to do a great job at this. I wish I knew more about it.
Great way to start a sentence.
Oh, yeah. So this is from a prophet. A lot of people, when they hear prophet or prophecy, think this is a guy whose whole job is to predict the future.
Yeah.
And it's not.
No.
So the main job of a prophet is to be the mouthpiece of God himself in relation to his people. So most prophecies in the prophets are not like, in 3 days' time, you will have a frog in your left pocket. They're all like, hey, stop sinning and worshiping idols, or else this will happen. Is that a prophecy, a prediction? Kinda.
So is gravity then.
Well, I mean,
you know what I mean?
What I mean is it's way more relational than it is like the fleece on the ground will be wet, but the ground around it will be dry.
Yeah.
That's like I'm predicting some set of facts. This is like you have a fork in the road because you, in relationship with this God that you're supposed to serve, are not doing a very good job. And he's setting down an ultimatum. It's a lot more relational. The other thing with a prophet and prophecy is it a prediction if you have the power to change, to orchestrate the future? Is it a prediction to say, I was hearing a guy named John Walton, who's an Old Testament professor in Wheaton, Illinois, Wheaton College or something like that. Maybe he's retired. I don't know. I was hearing him talk about it. And he said, is it a prediction if I write in my syllabus that on day 32 of class, we're going to talk about this ancient, almost said Midwest, but I meant Mideast language, ancient Near East language. Is that a prediction? Well, kind of, but also that's just me planning.
Yep.
That it's the difference between a prediction and a plan is I have some sort of power over the plan being executed. But a prediction is like, this is totally out of my hands. The weather will do this and whatever. Well, so all of these prophecies that we're talking about out of Isaiah the prophet, are they predictions that at some point in the future a man of sorrows will show up? Well, yeah. But also it's kind of not, because God has the power to do something about it. If he's the mouthpiece of God rather than some street magician, then like this is just him saying things that are going to happen or saying contingent things that God is trying to warn you about and lean you one way over that you're like just being rebellious on. It's the difference between saying tomorrow I think it's going to rain without your weather app and saying if you don't do your homework you're grounded.
And I think it's much more instructional, much more relational. But I also think it's much more of like the prophets I always think of too are declaring who God is. Yeah. Declaring much more of his character a lot of times. Now that character, in the Old Testament can be like, hey, God is just. And like God is faithful. You're not being faithful and you're not being just, therefore you cannot be in relationship with God because God cannot be with you. Like he needs that to happen. I mean, the very next section is 56. Maintain justice, do what is right, for my salvation is close at hand. Yeah. I mean, it's exactly what you just said. Like there's a part of this process that is relational, and you cannot have a healthy relationship with God if you're not willing to try to be healthy. Yeah.
Like there are some of God's plans in here, but that's the thing that I like more is like no weapon that is fashioned against you shall prosper. Is that a predictive fact? No. Mm-mm. He's describing what it's like if you follow him. Yep. If you follow me, no weapon can touch your soul and kill you. Yep. They may be able to kill your body, just like in one of the Gospels. Don't fear him who has the ability to kill the body, but fear him who has the ability to destroy the soul and throw it into hell. Like, is that a prediction? Kinda, but not really. It's more a warning and a plan that is totally within God's power and control. And so like, will no weapon formed against you prosper because you read this verse and it has to be true now because it's a prediction? No. But like what is this talking about? No, like eternal destiny weapon will prosper against you as you hold on to the Lord for dear life.
Well, and he's basically, this verse is declaring exactly what Jesus did. Yeah. It's basically declaring like the worst thing that could happen from the most strong military force did not keep Jesus in the ground. Yeah. It's not going to last. The second is no tongue, even pilots or anyone else, is able to speak anything of Jesus, anything other than his innocence. Yeah. He is innocent. So now he gets to declare we're innocent. And no tongue on earth can change that. No command on earth can change that.
I think with what you're saying, a better way to say what I just said was that no weapon over you will have the final word. Yes. Like I've been baptized. You're not now like stab proof or bulletproof.
Yeah.
It's not like no weapon can hurt you.
It's not like you haven't seen someone that's been baptized die.
If you're found in Christ, following after, allegiant to the firstborn from the dead, then no weapon can kill you forever.
Yep. You're just sleeping.
Yeah. That's oh man, that's such a cool New Testament word picture about martyrs who have died already. Most of us are fine, but some have fallen asleep. And it's like, no, they died. But like,
that's how John talks about it.
What's the difference between sleeping and Christians who are secure in the resurrection dying? Well, in both of those cases, they're going to wake up someday and start walking around all fine and whatever.
Well, and that was the way that they chose to clarify it. No, and it makes sense because then when you finish, this is the heritage of the servants of the Lord. This is their vindication from me. It just, that's it. Their heritage is what? Victory.
Yeah.
And their vindication is they've been declared clean. They've been declared pure.
That's the end of 17.
That's the end of 17.
Even the halfway through verse 5, all of verse 5, for your maker is your husband, the Lord of hosts is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your redeemer, your buyer back, your purchaser.
Your Boaz.
Coming right after Isaiah 53, one chapter earlier, by his stripes you are healed.
Yep. And I mean, the very end of 53 is that section we quoted there, right?
Yeah.
For he bore the sins of many and made the intercession for the transgressors.
Yeah.
So it's that declaration of like, hey, just so you know, he took this on. Therefore, I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life onto death and was numbered with the transgressors. He bore the sins of many to make intercession for those transgressors.
Yeah.
Mic drop. What? Well, dude, this is awesome. I really challenge. It's a fun thing, and even something that you don't have to wait for our podcast to do this. Do this in your own study. I think it's a challenging thing, but it's really fun. Let it be a randomized thing. You look up the verse of the day and you dive into it. Don't assume you know what you know. Like I know with us, we are asking questions like, "Who's this to? Who's this for?" But remember, we've learned these things over time, and you have to start somewhere. If you're not willing to dive in and challenge yourself a little bit, I think you're always going to have to live off what other people teach you about the Bible, rather than learning how to feed yourself a little bit, rather than learning how to be a little curious and investigating. And don't be nervous. Like if we go into the Bible just saying what we've heard from other people, and all we do is repeat the same things and read the same few verses, I think we're missing some things. I think we're missing the depth of what can be there. That's what I love the most about doing these things.
No single person with no amount of degrees, no amount of education, or even time spent in the Bible can totally give the final word on the Bible that the Bible won't refute.
No, I think it's healthy. It's healthy for you to have, I think, a personal relationship, and this sounds weird to say, with the Bible. I think you need to have, even if it's on rocky soil or it's new or it's a challenging thing, like start in the Gospel of John, start in the Epistle of the Philippians, read some Proverbs.
Yeah. Or not.
Read some Psalms. But I mean, genuinely find some things that you love and elevate them. Keep them on your lips. Memorize a verse or two.
I would say, you said start with the Gospel of John. I would echo that. Start from the Gospel of John, work your way forward through the rest of the New Testament, and then work your way backward. Yep. And let everything else just serve to amplify God's character as seen in Jesus, God's actions as seen in Jesus.
And Google's not a horrible tool. Don't trust everything you see on Google. Like you can Google search some stuff and verify what you're looking at and verify it with multiple sources. Don't just trust one source. But man, Google's a good resource. It's not the worst. It's a lot more dependable than it used to be on some of this stuff.
There's a reason that history classes and stuff nowadays is less focused in like public high schools and whatever. It's less focused on memorizing dates and is more focused on helping you know how to look up stuff about history.
Yep.
which maybe has some pros and cons, whatever. But it means that like there's a little bit of reliability as long as you know what you're looking for and have some foundation to filter out weird or totally tangent
that's why
things.
Verifying, I think, is always helpful. If you're only finding this opinion one place, be careful. So, well, this is fun. I'm really glad we did it. I know next week, as we kind of dive into this 2-part, encourage you to come back and check that out as we kind of talk about the power stories. And we kind of started with a fun discussion, and then we'll continue it the following week. If you found this stuff beneficial or you thought somebody maybe will enjoy it, feel free to share this, share the podcast and everything. I know I'm very excited about the next season of Chosen. They're filming it right now.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
It'll probably be out in the next 5 decades. One of those.
Yeah. Also excited for Doctor Strange.
If you want us to do that episode on tattoos, comment below and tell me if I should get a tattoo.
Yep.
And if at least 2 people comment positively,
tattoo,
I might do it.
Let's go. I gotta get on my phone.
It would be kind of cool to get a tattoo before the tattoo episode.
That would be awesome. I have the teeniest little one. So
I know exactly what I'd want, and it's literally 3 words from Isaiah 44:5.
Really? That's so cool.
I want to talk about it so bad, but you'll just have to wait.
Well, you guys have a great, glorious day in the Lord, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.